My name is Rachel Winter, and I am the assistant curator here, and I'm excited to talk to you today about the exhibition Blind Spot, Stephanie Syjuco. When you hear the title Blind Spot, what comes to mind? Is it the person by you when you're driving? Is it something you can't see or something you don't know? Or does something else come to mind? When we think about the title Blind Spot, it has several different meanings for us. We're thinking about things that we don't know about. We're thinking also about a bias blind spot, which is the way that our biases can affect other people, but maybe we don't know about them. There's also a personal significance for the title. The artist found out not too long ago that she has a blind spot where the light receptors in her eye didn't develop, but because it doesn't register in her field of vision, she didn't know about it. The work you see behind me is called Color Shift Correctional Overlay, and it's a recreation of a color calibration chart. Specifically, it's the Spider Checker color calibration chart. It has 48 colors, and you can see a real example of one here when you come and see the show. You can also find examples of different color calibration charts when you walk through the galleries. When we were preparing to install this, we did some printing samples to see what would look best, and we picked one, and then when we went to install it, it looked very differently. And if you come and see it, you'll see that it looks different if you are in the galleries or if you're downstairs and you look up as you're getting ready to come up to the show. It also looks different at different times of day. And in all of these differences, it actually makes the point that we wanted it to make, which is that color changes. Technology changes color. The way that we look at color can often be very subjective, but also color can be a tool for manipulating other things. As we think about the exhibition, one of the primary contexts for thinking about it is the ways that the United States colonized the Philippines in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And this is one of the questions that Stephanie's work explores. Photography is a medium that we often think of as being for documentation and for being very objective. And in some ways it is, but oftentimes it's also not. Photography, much like other media, reflects the biases of its maker. And as we think about research and knowledge, we're also invited to return to these questions of museums and archives. Museums and archives are institutions that also hold knowledge, and that knowledge is found in the objects that are in our collections, but also in the exhibitions that we share with you. The exhibition is an invitation to think more about what we know and what we might think of as objective, and you're invited to consider these questions as you walk through the show. And today I'm going to walk you through the show and highlight a few of my favorite pieces and talk to you a little bit more about the process of bringing the exhibition together. One of my favorite series of works in this room is the Chroma Key Aftermath series, which is 4 photographs, and they are all playing with this idea of chroma key green. My favorite of all of them is the one that features actually 2 of Stephanie's students. They're set up in this scene that's been constructed in her studio against a neutral gray background, and they're sitting there in a chroma key green environment, but they also have an American flag that's been reconstructed with chroma key green fabric around them. And it's thinking about the idea of who participates in protests and who is also affected by protests. So throughout the works, one of the things that the artist was thinking about is the way that protests are represented in news media and other sources. And oftentimes when they're talked about and represented in different ways, the actual meaning of the protest or the issue that's informing the protest can get lost in translation and transmission. This is the next gallery in our walkthrough, and this gallery is dealing with 2 different questions: archival collections and museum collections. And we're going to start by talking about archival collections. If you've never been to an archive or you've never heard about an archive, archives are collections or accumulations of different primary source material and historical documents. So you might think about, for example, letters written by former presidents or important diplomats. You might also think about letters between artists and museums and collectors and things like that. And all of these things are preserved because they have historical value, and researchers go back to them later in order to learn more. In this installation, this is called the Archival Index, and what Stephanie is doing here is interpreting the different ways that you work in an archive. Stephanie went through a number of folders in the National Museum of American History archives and other archives when she had an artist research fellowship at the Smithsonian, and she documented a lot of her findings by taking pictures in the archive, and many of them are recreated here and laid out across this table. The main question that Stephanie was thinking about in the archives was the way that the U.S. colonized the Philippines in the late 19th and early 20th century. Around the Archival Index, you'll also see 7 large photographs, and those 7 photographs represent 7 different historical moments that Stephanie encountered in her research. Two of my favorites are Fruits of Plenty, and they sort of look like still lives, and they show fruit in baskets. And what they're representing is actually the idea that when you come to America, it's this bountiful cornucopia. It's in a land full of opportunities that is plentiful. But you can see there's two different versions of the photo, and one is the inverse of the other. And these two different versions, the two different color schemes, are thinking about the ways that that experience and that promise isn't always true. Rather, it's a myth of opportunity and a myth of bountiful experiences that Stephanie is exploring. As we turn to this half of the gallery, we're thinking about museum collections, and you can see that in the work behind me, Dodge and Burn Visible Storage. When we talk about storage, we're often thinking about things that are hidden and out of sight. But now, in visible storage, you can see all of those things. And so when you see this collection of things alongside other fun objects like emojis, fire emojis, and other emojis that you can see when you look closely, the installation speaks to the idea of resisting empire and the ways that it values some populations and not others. Yeah. As we enter the final gallery of the walkthrough, we are shifting our tone in our conversation a little bit. There are 3 bodies of work in this gallery, and all of them are based in ethnographic photographs. Ethnographic photographs are photographs taken by researchers or ethnographers, often in the 19th and 20th centuries, and often documenting people from non-Western countries. The problem with these photographs is that the people we see in them didn't have the agency to say how they wanted to be represented. Rather, much like some of the other works we've talked about in this walkthrough, they reflect the biases of the maker. Specifically, we're looking at ethnographic photographs that were taken around or during the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The U.S. had recently acquired the Philippines as a colony, but also it brought around 1,200 Filipino people to the U.S. to be put on display at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. They were put on display in sort of a living village that has also been likened to a human zoo. And at this point, the people who were brought over didn't have the opportunity to say, this is how I want to be represented. And this illustrates, in a way, the hierarchies that also made it possible for the U.S. to colonize the Philippines. And as we look at the 3 bodies of work in this room that are based in ethnographic photographs, we're also seeing 3 strategies of intervention. And by intervening, what the artist is doing is denying these ethnographic photographs the ability to be objective or to act as truthful documentation, and reminding us that these photographs are framed by the biases of their maker. In the photographs you see behind me, which is the After Images series, one strategy of intervention is the artist physically crumpling the paper that the photographs are on so that we can't actually see who's in them anymore. And in the video Block Out the Sun, we see the artist's hand covering the faces of the people in the ethnographic photographs. And so we don't know who they are, but they also can't be exploited anymore. And in the last work in the gallery, it's actually a new work that we commissioned for the exhibition. In the process of planning the show with Stephanie, she mentioned that she had this idea for a new project, and so we commissioned her to finish it for the exhibition. And we're really excited that this work is now a part of the museum's collection. The work is called Blind Spot, and so it returns us to the title of the show. Blind Spot is a collection of 40 ethnographic photographs that the artist is digitally intervening into by using the healing brush tool in Photoshop to erase the people who were in the ethnographic photos. And instead, we are left with the residue of something that was there and that is now no longer there. By doing this, the artist argues that she is digitally liberating people from the ethnographic gaze. This exhibition was made possible by generous support from the Terra Foundation for American Art.